My family secretly mocked me as the cash cow until I burned everything down to save myself. My name is Vivian Brooks, and I'm from Pittsburgh. My story doesn't start with a dramatic explosion or one defining moment. It's more like a slow, heavy buildup, the kind of weight you don't notice right away because you've been carrying it for so long. I started supporting my family when I was 16. Not just helping out, I mean fully supporting. My dad, once a foreman in a local steel company, got laid off and never really recovered from it. He spent the first year after losing his job sulking in the garage, and then, gradually, he stopped pretending he was even trying to get work. He claimed his back was ruined, that he was depressed, and maybe he was, but the point is, he checked out. My mom was the emotional epicenter of the house, meaning she cried a lot, shouted a lot, broke down in fits of anxiety over bills, food, the roof, you name it. She had her good days, sure, but mostly it felt like I was raising her instead of the other way around. Then there was Blake. Blake was 2 years older than me, but you'd never guess it. While I was pulling extra shifts at the diner to help pay for groceries, Blake was always somewhere working on a plan. His plans usually involved fast money, poker nights, or some sketchy app that promised big returns. None of them ever panned out, but the death sure did. From 21 on, I was bailing him out of loan shark traps and fronting money to settle with bookies. The first time, he came home with a black eye and a split lip. He didn't even ask. He just said, "Viv, I messed up," and I was already reaching for my savings jar. It felt like love. That's what I told myself. My sister, Ava, was the baby of the family. Spoiled, bratty, and always ready to paint herself as the victim. She couldn't stand it when anyone praised me, and she made it her mission to undermine me at every turn. If I got a raise, she'd call me a brown-noser. If I bought myself a new pair of boots after months of saving, she'd make some comment about how I must be stealing from the tip jar. I didn't hate her, not exactly, but I couldn't figure out how we ended up so different. By the time I was 24, I was juggling 2 jobs, one at a physical therapy clinic and another cleaning houses on the weekends. The money wasn't great, but it was steady. Every month, like clockwork, Blake would come to me with his eyes downcast and a fresh disaster in hand. $2,000 here, $1,500 there. Once it was $6,000. I drained the last of my emergency fund and took out a personal loan. He hugged me afterward and told me I saved his life. I believed him. That's the worst part. I told myself paying his debts was my way of keeping the family together, that if I didn't step in, everything would fall apart. I started to confuse enabling him with loving him. And the more I gave, the more they expected. My mom stopped asking how I was doing altogether, unless I looked tired, in which case she'd complain that my exhaustion was making her anxious. It wasn't just money. I gave my time, my energy, my sanity. I missed birthdays, weddings, even funerals because I was working. Once, I left a friend's bridal shower early because Blake texted me that he was in trouble, again. Turned out he'd just blown through his rent money at a blackjack table and wanted me to bail him out before his landlord showed up. I kept thinking that if I just helped one more time, he'd finally straighten out, that he'd land on his feet, and we could be siblings again, without the constant weight of his screw-ups dragging us down. But that never happened. The calls kept coming. The emergencies kept stacking, and I kept answering. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with secondhand furniture and a car that barely made it up hills. My coworkers assumed I was saving for something big, a house maybe, or school. They had no idea I was bleeding myself trying to keep my family from collapsing. The worst part? I thought I was being noble, that somehow my suffering meant something. But what I was really doing was disappearing, bit by bit, year after year. That's the life I built for myself, not out of ambition or dreams, but out of duty and guilt. And by the time I realized how much of myself I had sacrificed, I didn't even recognize the person looking back at me in the mirror. It happened on a Sunday, like so many of the small humiliations that piled up in my life. We always had dinner together at Mom's place, even when no one really wanted to. It was a routine, a ritual no one questioned. I showed up with 2 bags of groceries like I always did. Meat, vegetables, some sparkling water because Mom liked to feel fancy even though her dishes were always chipped. I'd spent the morning cleaning my apartment and working overtime at the clinic, but as usual, no one asked how I was. I was just there, a fixture. The house smelled like burnt garlic bread and tension. My brother Blake was already in his usual spot on the couch, watching some low-rent poker stream on his phone, pretending like he had a strategy. My younger sisters, Brianna and Samantha, were in the kitchen with Mom, pretending to help, mostly gossiping and messing around with Instagram filters. I hung my coat, tucked my bag under the entryway bench, and stepped into the dining room. No one looked up. I could hear their voices echoing from the kitchen, light and sharp in that way only people who don't think they're being heard speak. "Vivian will cover it," Brianna said, her voice so casual it made my stomach tighten. For real, Samantha chimed in with a snort. She always does. She's basically the family ATM. And then laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not one awkward chuckle. Real laughter. Deep, unfiltered, unbothered laughter. Mom even joined in, muttering something I couldn't make out, but it had the cadence of a joke. The air left my lungs. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, invisible as usual, staring at the half-set table with the mismatched silverware and the cracked gravy boat they always insisted on using for tradition. My hands were still cold from the walkover. I let them hang there like they didn't belong to me. They never saw me walk in. Eventually, I cleared my throat, loud enough that someone should have noticed, but all I got was Brianna turning around, flipping her hair like she was on some talk show, smiling that practiced, sharp little smile she always had ready. "Hey, Viv, we were just talking about you." I smiled back, not because I meant it, but because I didn't know how to do anything else. I walked to the kitchen, handed the grocery bags to Mom, who didn't even look me in the eye, and pretended everything was fine. I don't know why that moment cut deeper than the others. It wasn't the first time they took me for granted. It wasn't even the first time they joked about it. But hearing them laugh like that, all of them, even Samantha, who used to sneak into my bed when there was a thunderstorm and cry about monsters under the bed, it did something to me. I went through the motions. Set the table. Heated the rolls. Poured drinks. I even asked how everyone's week had been. Blake mumbled something about trying a new betting app. Brianna launched into a story about a new job prospect that would definitely work out this time. Samantha showed off a dress she bought online. None of them asked me a single question. Dinner was the usual bland mess. Overcooked chicken, under-seasoned green beans, that one watery store brand dessert Mom always insists is just like the real thing. I chewed through it, nodded at the right times, smiled at stories I'd heard versions of 100 times before. I didn't say a word about what I'd heard. What was the point? After dinner, I did the dishes. Alone as always. Blake disappeared halfway through to take a call. Brianna said she'd totally help in a sec, then just wandered off to the living room. Samantha sat scrolling through her phone, legs up on the armrest, not even pretending to care. Mom came in when I was elbow deep in suds. She had that look she always got after dinner, like she wanted to say something meaningful, but didn't quite know how. She picked up a damp towel and dabbed at a plate I'd already cleaned. "You're quiet tonight," she said. I kept my eyes on the sink. "Just tired." She nodded like she understood, but I could tell she didn't. She never did. She never saw me. Not really. When the kitchen was clean, I said goodbye. Hugs all around. Same scripted lines. "Thanks for everything, Viv. You're the best. Drive safe." Empty words. I walked to my car in the dark, hands shaking a little, not from the cold, but from the slow realization that none of them actually respected me. I was useful. That's all. A walking wallet with a smile taped on. It was like someone had flipped a switch and lit up all the dark corners I'd been too afraid to look at before. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with the lights off, still wearing my coat, just staring at the silence. I thought about all the birthdays I'd paid for, all the rent checks I'd floated when Blake was in between jobs, all the stupid little gifts I'd bought for Mom because I thought maybe this time she'd say she was proud of me. But all I had ever been to them, was their ATM. And I finally realized that's exactly how they wanted it. I was still up when the text came through. Couldn't sleep. Not after what I'd heard at dinner. My mind kept replaying Brianna's voice, family ATM, over and over like a broken record, and every time I thought about it, I felt a new wave of heat rise in my chest. I was lying on the couch, lights off, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table, the hum of the fridge in the background. I hadn't even changed out of the sweater I'd worn to dinner. I just didn't have the energy. My phone buzzed. I expected it to be a work notification or maybe some spam, but it was a message from Mom. Just 5 words. "Can you call me, please?" I almost ignored it. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. I could have put the phone face down, gone to bed, pretended I didn't see it until morning. But some part of me, the same part that always kicked in when they needed something, still answered. I hit dial and listened to it ring. She picked up on the second one. "Vivian," she said, voice low and tight. "I need your help. Blake's in trouble." Of course he is, I thought. I didn't say it out loud, just rubbed my eyes and leaned back against the cushion. "How much this time?" I asked, because that was always the question. Not what happened, not what does he need, but how much? There was a pause, long enough that I thought she might lie. Then she said it. 9,000. I laughed. I actually laughed, this dry, humorless sound that just spilled out before I could stop it. $9,000? I repeated. "What the hell did he do?" "He borrowed money," she said quickly. "From someone not great." "Not great," I echoed. "You mean a loan shark?" Her silence was answer enough. "He said it was just temporary," she continued. as if that excused it. A short-term thing. But now they're threatening him. My hand clenched around the phone. What kind of threats? Then she said the name. Nico. That shut me up. I'd heard of him. Everyone in our part of the city had. He wasn't just some guy who shook you down outside a poker room. He had people. Real people. The kind who didn't make empty threats. I got a message, she whispered. I didn't know who else to call. There was a ping in the background. A second later, she forwarded it to me. I opened it. Your brother has 48 hours. If he doesn't pay, we come to collect. From someone. No signature. No frills. Just that. Cold and clear. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My pulse thudded in my throat. Jesus, I muttered. Vivian, she said, her voice cracking now. Please. If you don't help, they'll hurt him. Maybe worse. I stood up and started pacing. Like movement could burn off the pressure rising in my chest. $9,000. It wasn't just a stupid mistake this time. This wasn't some bounced rent check or late car payment. This was a man with a reputation for broken kneecaps and people who disappeared. How long has he known? I asked. About the deadline. Blake didn't tell me until tonight, she said. I think he thought he could win it back before it got serious. Of course he did, I muttered. I wanted to throw something. Anything. My wine glass. My phone. I gritted my teeth instead. She went quiet again, like she was waiting for me to say I'd fix it. Like she always did. I don't have that kind of money, I said finally. You do, she said. Your savings. I closed my eyes. That money's for me. For rent. For car repairs. For when my insurance doesn't cover a dental visit. Not for this. Not for him. I'm not asking for all of it, she said. Just this one time. That's when something snapped. I heard myself say it, flat and cold. No, not this time. Silence. You're going to let your brother get hurt? She asked, her voice suddenly sharp. Like she was accusing me of something unspeakable. I'm not the one who borrowed from Nico, I said. I'm not the one who made this mess. I'm asking you as your mother, she said. No, I repeated. You're asking me as your banker. Another silence. Longer this time. Then she hung up. No goodbye? I stood there in the middle of my living room, still holding the phone like it was going to bite me. The message was still on the screen. Your brother has 48 hours. I turned off the screen, but the words were burned into my brain. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound outside made me jump. Every passing car felt like a warning. And through all of it, I kept wondering the same thing. If this is how far it's gone, how much longer before they drag me down with them? I almost didn't go to the conference. It was one of those 3-day industry things where half the people are there just to collect branded pens and pretend to network while secretly checking their email every 10 minutes. I only went because my supervisor begged me to fill in for a colleague who backed out last minute, and honestly, I needed the distraction. Anything was better than sitting at home waiting for another call from my mom, another crisis involving Blake, another sleepless night wondering how I'd pay rent if they drained me again. It was held in this generic downtown hotel that tried too hard to be upscale. Beige walls, plastic plants, the same bland coffee in every conference room. I was wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit right, and trying not to look like someone who was 3 deep into emotional exhaustion. I had just finished sitting through a painfully slow presentation on injury tracking software when I spotted him near the buffet table. He wasn't doing anything special, just pouring coffee and looking, well, calm. That's what struck me first. He didn't have the usual stressed-out energy of everyone else in the room. He looked like he belonged to a different kind of life. He saw me struggling to reach the sugar packets wedged behind a towering pile of napkins and offered one without a word, like he'd already figured out I'd need it. I said thanks and was about to walk away, but then he asked if I'd been to one of these before. Simple question. Nothing weird about it. But his tone was different. No fake charm. No try-hard charisma. Just a man making polite conversation without expecting anything in return. His name was Michael. He was an architect from Raleigh, in town to speak on sustainable design in healthcare spaces. I didn't even pretend to be familiar with the topic, and he didn't pretend to be interested in mine. But somehow we kept talking. We ended up sitting together at lunch, skipping the keynote speaker neither of us cared about. We joked about the hotel's sad excuse for cheesecake and traded stories about terrible conference experiences. He told me about a time his laptop died mid-presentation, and he had to draw floor plans on a flip chart like it was 1995. I told him about a client who once mistook a resistance band for a jump rope and nearly broke a window. That conversation stretched into another coffee the next day, and then a walk through the nearby park after the final session. He didn't ask for my number. He gave me his card and said, "Only if you want to." That stuck with me. No pressure. No games. Just a grown man who knew how to be respectful. I did call him. The following week, after debating with myself for far too long, I dialed the number and braced for awkwardness. There wasn't any. He picked up and remembered my name right away. We talked for 2 hours. We talked again 2 days later. And again after that. There wasn't some grand romantic explosion. No sparks flying or whirlwind passion. It was just steady, easy, for someone like me, who lived in a state of permanent emotional whiplash that felt revolutionary. He drove up to visit once in early spring. Brought flowers, not the kind from a gas station, but something he said reminded him of the park we walked through. He didn't comment on my small apartment or the dishes I'd rushed to put away. He just smiled and asked if I wanted to show him around the neighborhood. Over the next few months, Michael became a kind of quiet anchor in my life. He wasn't flashy or intense. He didn't try to fix me or pry into my family drama. He was just there, a steady voice when my hands were shaking after another call from home, a warm presence on weekends when I didn't want to be alone. He listened. He remembered things I said in passing. He sent a book I mentioned wanting to read without a note, just the book in the mail with a little sticky tab marking a quote he liked. When he asked me to move in with him, it wasn't dramatic. No candlelight dinner, no big proposal. Just a Sunday morning, us sitting on his couch with coffee and the windows open. He said, "You don't have to decide right away. I just like having you here." I didn't answer right away. I sat there holding that mug like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Because no one had ever made space for me like that before. Not without asking for something in return. Not without strings. A week later, I said yes. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I let myself believe that something good might actually last. That maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be the one holding everyone else up all the time. Maybe it was okay to be held too. We'd only been engaged for 3 weeks. Michael proposed at home, quiet and sincere, just the two of us in the kitchen while we were unpacking groceries. No fanfare, no big audience. Just this calm, steady moment that felt more real than anything I'd ever experienced. I said yes, and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was stepping into something that would end in exhaustion or disappointment. I was happy, not terrified happy, not nervous happy, just content. That rare kind of peace I used to think was only for other people. My mother insisted on a family dinner. She said she wanted to celebrate, but I knew what it really was. She wanted a chance to examine Michael in person, test him like some shiny new appliance, and see how much use she could get out of him. I should have said no. I should have listened to the instinct that had been screaming at me since she called. But I caved, like I always do. Because I was still learning how to say no to people who only knew how to take. We brought a bottle of wine and a dessert Michael made himself, a citrus tart that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The second we walked in, I felt the shift. My mother did her usual fake smile. Blake gave Michael the once-over like he was a car on a dealership lot. Brianna's eyes went straight to Michael's wristwatch. Samantha just squealed and hugged me like we hadn't grown up in the same house. Dinner was fake cheerful, a script we'd all memorized. Everyone smiling too wide, laughing too loud, telling stories that were just sanitized enough to seem functional. Michael, polite as ever, answered questions about his job, his firm, the projects he was working on. He was generous, thoughtful, patient, and they devoured it. I could see it happening in real time. Their eyes tracking the details, their smiles sharpening. After dessert, Michael stepped out to take a quick call from one of his project leads. I offered to help clear the table and brought a stack of plates into the kitchen. I'd just started the water in the sink when I heard them. I wasn't trying to listen. I swear I wasn't. But the kitchen opens right into the dining area, and they didn't bother to lower their voices. Brianna was the first to say it. Once they're married, we'll finally have some breathing room. Blake snorted. You think he'll cover your debt too? He's got architect money, right? He looks like the kind of guy who wouldn't say no if Vivian asked, Samantha said, and then giggled. She probably doesn't even realize how useful he is. Mom, Brianna said, you have to talk to her. She needs to be strategic. This is a long-term opportunity. Like, real financial stability. My mother didn't disagree. She didn't even hesitate. She'll help, she said, calm as ever. She always does. That's when I heard Michael's voice. Help with what? It was quiet. Not angry. Just cold. I turned around and saw him standing in the doorway, phone still in his hand, eyes locked on my mother. I don't think I've ever seen him look like that. He wasn't yelling, but he might as well have been. Everyone froze. No one moved. No one said a word. Then he looked at me. Vivian, he said. What's going on? I couldn't breathe. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I felt like a pane of glass someone had just dropped from 6 stories up. My mother, ever the actress, tried to recover. Michael, you're misunderstanding. We were just joking. Were you? He asked, his voice like steel. No, I said. My own voice sounded foreign to me. They weren't joking. Michael's gaze didn't shift. Vivian, talk to me, please. So I did. Right there, in that too-bright kitchen that smelled like lemon cleaner and manipulation, I told him everything. Not just about the dinner. About the years. About Blake and the gambling, the debts, the threats. About the money I'd given, the savings I'd lost, The time I'd wasted trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. I told him about the night I sat awake for hours, holding my breath and hoping Nico's people didn't show up. I told him about being called the family ATM, about the way they laughed behind my back, about how I'd swallowed my pain for years because I thought that's what love looked like. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He just listened. And when I was done, when the room was silent except for the drip of water from the faucet, he walked over and took my hand. No words. Just that. I looked at my mother. At my siblings. Their faces were blank. Shocked, maybe, but not ashamed. I think we're done here, Michael said quietly. We walked out together, hand in hand, the citrus tart still untouched on the counter. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for leaving them behind. I felt free. It happened on a Thursday. Late afternoon, gray sky, air thick with the kind of sticky humidity that clings to your skin and won't let go. I was supposed to be at work, but my phone lit up with a single sentence from Samantha. You need to come now. No context. No explanation. Just that. For a second I thought about ignoring it. Then another text came in. He's here. Nico. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my keys, told Michael I'd be back soon, and drove like my hands weren't shaking. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the street was dead quiet. A black sedan sat parked in the driveway, engine still running. The front door was wide open. I stepped inside and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Not literally, but in that way a room feels cold when everyone inside is scared. Nico was standing in the middle of the living room like he owned the place. Slim, dressed sharp, calm in that chilling way people are when they know they control the room. Blake was hunched on the edge of the couch, sweat pooling through the back of his shirt. My mother stood behind him, arms folded tight, her mouth pressed into a line so thin it barely existed. Brianna and Samantha were on opposite sides of the room, like they couldn't decide whether to stay or run. I didn't bother with hellos. You called me, I said to Samantha. So here I am. Nico turned, looked me over once like he was measuring a piece of furniture he might want to take home. Vivian, he said smoothly. The responsible one. The one who always pays. No, I said. Not anymore. Blake made a noise, a pathetic half-sob or maybe a warning. I didn't care. Your brother owes a balance, Nico said. It's not a large amount. Manageable. But it's overdue. And you know how this works. I know exactly how it works, I said. I know the rules. I know the threats. And I know I'm done. He raised an eyebrow. You're refusing to pay? Yes. I said it without flinching, even though my heart was thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I've paid enough, I added. He didn't respond. Just stared. But my mother did. Vivian, please, she said, voice thin and desperate. We're in danger. No, I said. You are. Because of him. Because you let this happen. Again. She opened her mouth, probably to say something about family, about loyalty, about how I didn't understand. But I didn't give her the chance. Do you want to know how much I've given you? I asked. All of you? Do you want the real number? Because I've kept track. Silence. I looked around the room, made sure every single one of them was paying attention. $200,000, I said. Blake looked like I'd slapped him. Brianna actually gasped. Samantha turned pale. My mother blinked, stunned. That's tuition payments, rent, gambling debts, car repairs, groceries, utilities, bailouts, loan payments. That's Christmas presents I covered for you. Vacations I paid for that I didn't even go on. Hospital bills. Plane tickets. Everything. $200,000. No one said a word. Not one of them. Then Michael stepped through the door. He must have followed me. Or maybe Samantha texted him too. I don't know. But seeing him there, calm, tall, shoulders square, made me feel stronger than I had any right to. He walked up beside me and looked directly at Nico. She said no, he said. So that's it. You get nothing. Nico's gaze flicked between us, and for a second, the tension in the room snapped like a live wire. But then he smiled, slow and cold. I see, he said. You two are a team now. Michael didn't flinch. That's right. Nico straightened his cuffs, nodded once, and turned to leave. No threats. No grand speech. Just a look, the kind that says it's not over, even if the conversation is. He stepped out the front door, got into the car, and drove away. The silence he left behind was worse than his presence. I turned to face them. I'm not your backup plan, I said. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your insurance policy. Not anymore. My mother started to speak, but I didn't let her. You laughed when Brianna called me the family ATM, I said. You plotted to use Michael for money. You stood by while Blake dragged me through hell. And you expected me to keep smiling and cleaning up after all of you. They just stood there, quiet and stunned, as if I'd somehow betrayed them by telling the truth. But I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, Michael at my side. And for the first time, I didn't look back. I scheduled the call for Sunday night. 7 p.m. sharp. No excuses, no reschedules. I sent the Zoom link with one line, mandatory. Don't be late. It felt absurd in a way, confronting a lifetime of betrayal through a laptop screen. But it was the only way to get them all in one place without someone walking out or pretending they had to check on dinner. I wanted them to sit with it. All of it. Together. No distractions. Just me, a camera, and the truth. Michael sat next to me the whole time, silent but steady. He didn't say anything, didn't interfere, just kept his hand resting lightly against mine, grounding me in a way no one ever had before. The moment the call opened, I saw all their faces in the little boxes. My mother in her too bright kitchen with her usual mask of strained dignity. Blake in some dimly lit room, probably a borrowed apartment. Brianna leaned back with a glass of wine like she was watching a drama that had nothing to do with her. Samantha looked like she didn't know whether to cry or smile. I didn't waste time. Thanks for joining, I said, voice even, hands steady. Let's begin. I shared my screen. The first slide was a spreadsheet. Color-coded, time-stamped, detailed down to the cent. A timeline that stretched back over a decade, showing every wire transfer, every bank withdrawal, every emergency fund that became another bailout. This is the money I've given you, I said. Every dollar, every favor, every debt I covered that you never paid back. I didn't flinch as I went box by box. A $4, 500 payment for Blake's car after he crashed it drunk. $9,000 to a loan shark. $600 here. $2,000 there. Grocery money. Medical bills. Rent for Brianna when she was too proud to tell her boyfriend she couldn't afford their lease. Tuition help for Samantha after she forgot to apply for aid. Every transaction was dated and documented. Receipts, statements, screenshots. I'd spent the last 3 days combing through every account, every folder, and organizing it so thoroughly no one could deny it. Their silence was its own kind of noise. I moved to the next slide. These are the manipulations, I said. Recorded phone calls. Text messages. Messages you never meant for me to hear, forwarded by accident. Here's Brianna talking about how to convince Michael to buy Mom a new car. Here's Samantha joking that I'd probably pay for her wedding someday, if she played her cards right. They shifted in their seats. Blake's jaw tightened. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. I'm done, I said. No emotion. Just fact. I'm no longer your backup plan. I am not your wallet. I am not your safety net. I am not your emotional sponge. I let that hang in the air. From this moment on, if any of you contact me asking for money, for anything, no matter how small, you will receive a cease and desist letter. If you ignore it, I will take legal action. I have consulted an attorney. I have everything documented. Brianna opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. No interruptions. You've had your turn. This is mine. I closed the slides and looked into the camera. You've used me, lied to me, laughed at me behind my back. You built a system where I was the only one giving and you were the only ones taking. That system is gone. I leaned forward. Don't call. Don't text. Don't show up. You are no longer my responsibility. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear on my mother's face. Not panic, not shame, just fear. The realization that the tool she relied on had slipped out of her hands. Goodbye, I said, and ended the call. I sat there for a long time after the screen went black. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was full, solid, clean, like fresh air after a storm. Michael didn't say anything. He just squeezed my hand once. And that was enough. It's been 6 months since that call. 6 months since I finally said no and meant it. Since I stopped being the one who held everyone else together while quietly falling apart. And in that time, the world, or at least my small corner of it, changed more than I ever thought it could. Blake is in prison. He was arrested after trying to defraud a local business owner with some convoluted investment scheme that was never going to work. The charges stuck. There was no one left to bail him out. No sister with a checkbook waiting in the wings. The look on his face when I didn't show up in court said everything. He'd finally run out of road. Brianna is under investigation for misusing company funds at the marketing firm where she worked. Turns out the outfits, the spa days, the vacations she flaunted on social media weren't as self-made as she wanted people to believe. I found out through an article someone sent me with a headline that almost made me laugh out loud. For once, the consequences weren't mine to clean up. My parents lost the house. The mortgage was never really under control, and once the debts caught up with them and I wasn't there to buffer the fallout, it all came crashing down. I don't know where they are now. I haven't asked. They haven't called. And honestly, that silence is a gift I didn't know I needed. Meanwhile, I bought a house. It's not flashy or big, but it's ours, mine and Michael's. A 2-story place tucked near a quiet lake upstate, with wide windows and a porch that wraps around like it's meant to hold every kind of weather. There's a dock where I drink my coffee in the mornings and a room that I turned into a reading space with nothing but shelves, sunlight, and silence. Michael spends most days in his studio working on his next project. I've started taking on fewer clients and spending more time volunteering. A few months ago, I launched a small nonprofit, a fund to help people who've been financially abused by their families. Not just big cases, small ones too. The slow bleed. The years of guilt payments and coerced help and quiet desperation. I named it after my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever told me it was okay to want more. I'm not saying it's perfect. Some mornings I still wake up half expecting a crisis to land in my inbox. But it doesn't. And little by little, I'm learning how to live without that constant buzz of dread in my chest. I make breakfast because I want to, not because someone's expecting me to feed them. I buy things that bring me joy instead of hiding every purchase like it's a betrayal. I say yes only when I mean it. And more importantly, I say no and don't apologize for it. For the first time in my life, I'm not living for someone else. Not performing. Not fixing. Just existing. Freely, fully, quietly.